Welcome to Daily Insurgency. I'm Jason Lee with my co-host sitting over here to my left, Aaron Lujan.
What's happening, Jason?
And we're bringing you all the news of the day
Yeah.
and the news of the week and putting it into a biblical lens and a biblical perspective. We launched on Saturday with some great results. We had a ton of viewership on YouTube, more than we could ever imagine, and we're hoping to keep that trend going. So let's roll with the news today. What do you got, Aaron?
Well, I wanted to start talking about Holy Week. Culturally, we celebrate Christmas kind of as the pinnacle holiday of the year, and theologically, Easter is the most important holiday as the church. And we just entered into Holy Week yesterday, Palm Sunday, took the family to church, really missed the Catholic tradition of, or at least my old Catholic tradition of carrying the palms. But we didn't do that, but I did it in my heart. And I just wanted to bring it up because I think that it is a solemn week where it's a time to reflect on the sacrifice that Jesus made on the cross on Good Friday. He died, rose again into glory, ascended at the right hand of the Father as it's commemorated on Easter Sunday. And I just want to encourage the church to think about fasting and praying. Something that I do personally, which I'm actually dreading, is I'm going to have my last meal Thursday, and then I'm gonna break that fast Sunday morning, just because I want to take that time to really be open to what the Holy Spirit is saying, and really just avail myself in devotion to Jesus, because I'm a mess, guys, and I feel like fasting and praying will really exorcise the demons. You didn't see that one coming, did you?
I didn't see that one coming. I love Easter. I love Easter more than Christmas. I am one of those guys. But I do think that Easter has become almost like more pagan than
It is.
Christmas.
They want to hijack it.
It's like this season of like springtime and growth and all of that is kind of what the non-believing community out there sees Easter as, is like this celebration of springtime, more so than what it really is, which is a celebration of Jesus' death, burial, and resurrection.
Yeah, it's not about the chocolate bunnies or the Easter eggs. And my son actually encouraged me to bring this up because he says, "Papa, I'm so excited about Easter. Easter's coming. I'm so excited." And I'm like, what a precious young man. He's excited about the resurrection of Jesus Christ. So that's what I wanted to say on that. And we're paying attention to the news. And our opening show over the weekend, we talked about the Colorado bill that threatens parental rights, because if you dead name or misgender your child, as they're calling it, if your child is trans, we talked about how Colorado's bucking the nation, not in a good way. And it seems to be a counter bill in Florida. SB 1288, the parental rights bill, successfully passed its first committee hurdle in Florida, which is alongside another HB 1505 bill. This legislation taking significant steps to reinforce and safeguard parental authority in education and healthcare. So school surveys with parental consent. The bill is mandating that schools notify parents and obtain explicit opt-in consent before conducting surveys or questionnaires involving students. It mandates that parents have access to children's medical records, unrestricted and unadulterated access. It prohibits unauthorized biomedical devices without parental consent. It's essentially a bill that seems to be strengthening parental rights. What are your thoughts in light of the Colorado bill?
So Colorado had this in their legislature as well, a parent bill of rights. It did fail last year. I think it's being brought up again. I don't know if it's actually going to be heard. We'll see what happens. But that bill was brought up in front of the House last year and failed. And I know that on a federal level, they're trying some of these parent bill of rights as well. But basically, if you look what's happening across the country, parental rights are being stripped in lieu of the government saying that I know what's best for your child. And they're looking at parents and going like, you're going to abide by what we want you to do. Well, that was never the intent of government. That was never the intent of God's role of parents in a child's life. But these Democrats, these woke individuals, they don't care what God's plan was for parenting, what God's plan was for raising your children right. The only thing that they care about is whether or not they have the ability to shove these social constructs down your children's throats.
Yeah, we're going to be laser focused on parental rights here on Spiritual Insurgency because I think Jason, correct me if I'm wrong, but would agree with me when I say that as the church, as far as the church is concerned, parental rights is a front and center issue because it's always been the encroachment of big government and the tyrannical state that has always been the threat to parental rights. And it's parental rights that sits at the forefront of the culture. I mean, it's literally the family structure. They're disassembling the nuclei of the family unit. When you separate and strip children away from parents, you're destroying the family at an elemental level. So if this is taking place in state houses, we need to be laser-like focused on it. And as we sit here in Colorado, it's important that we put pressure on, is it the Senate here in Colorado that's scheduled to vote for this bill?
So the Senate is going to hear it next. Now, here's the magic, okay? There's, I think, roughly 2.5 weeks left of the Colorado legislature. And so there is an opportunity that if this bill does not make it through the Senate in the Senate's process, that this bill will die based on time, that they won't be able to actually hear this bill through. And the longer that we can delay action in the Senate, the more likely we are to eliminate this bill. Now, somebody would ask, well, how likely is this to happen? Well, I'll tell you what, the more people that sign up to testify, because the Senate still has a lot of bills to debate and a lot of bills to vote on. And so as the end draws near, number one, this is when we see hyper passing of these nonsensical bills. But number two, if they look and they go, we have 500 people ready to testify on this House Bill 25, was it 135224? One of those.
He's good, guys.
The fact that there's that many bills in the House is like absolutely insane. By the way, the legislature in Colorado is limited on how many bills each individual representative can put forward, and they far surpassed that number. So they've allowed for legislators that fall on the Democrat side to propose additional pieces of legislation. The idea that we need to pass over 300, 400, 500, 600 new pieces of law into place every single year in a state is absolutely absurd. Like, our laws are enough. We don't need 600 more every single day.
No. And the other story that's front and center for me right now is coming out of the Independent. Meta, Facebook owner, could be forced to sell off Instagram and WhatsApp. This is a landmark trial from the federal government pursuing an antitrust lawsuit against what they're claiming to be a social media monopoly, and that if this is found to be true, we could see Meta, the parent company of Facebook, having to part ways with WhatsApp and Instagram. And a lot of people looking at this case is saying not only does this going to have major ramifications for the social media ecosystem, there may be new social media companies that may emerge. We might see the weakening of Facebook. And that's interesting for the church because Facebook has been sitting at the center of a lot of this censorship of political discourse and really just cultural engineering, if I may. And so I think the church should be looking at this and asking the question, does Facebook, Meta, have a undue monopoly? I would say yes, they do. I call it vulture capitalism. What they do is there was an amazing app a couple years back called Periscope. It was essentially allowed you to stream live video, and I think in and of itself would have threatened even X, then Twitter, being even able to have a position in the marketplace. But yet that company was bought up, and they continually are bought up, and then they're just buried. And so I think we live in this rigged digital age where only certain voices are heard, other voices are eliminated because we have these monopolies. And I think the church should be a fan of breaking up monopolies.
I think it's very interesting because this is definitely this play on the free market economy and corporate responsibility. And when you look at social media as a whole, you could say, okay, number one, can you really have a monopoly when you do have competitors, right? X is its own platform. Facebook and Instagram are together. YouTube is still the number one video streaming app in the world. Rumble is biting at the heels of YouTube, and there's competition. And then you have things like Pinterest and all the other alternative social media platforms, and you look at it and you go, okay, is there really a monopoly? And that's one of the questions that you have to ask when you're looking at this from the viewpoint of a free market economist. Now, the flip side is that why did Facebook buy Instagram? And that's a question that you have to look at. And if you look at the reason and you look at what was happening was that Instagram was taking viewership and taking the scrolling time from Facebook. Why does that matter? Well, because of ad sales and ad revenue for Facebook. So every time you see an advertisement that is going to pop up on your screen in the middle of your scrolling, your endless scrolling, that money, part of it is going to creators and the other part of it is going back to Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, Rumble, anywhere that sells advertising. And so when you lose viewership, you lose advertising dollars.
Yeah.
And so that's really why Facebook saw that Instagram was starting to take some of the viewership away from Facebook, and Facebook went after Instagram. Now, we're on the precipice of TikTok potentially being bought by a U.S. entity, or at least by an entity outside of China. Those details have not been finalized. But if they don't finalize some deal, TikTok could be eliminated from the United States, which would see the rise again of Instagram and Facebook earning back some of that market share and that time spent online. But it also opens the door for, once again, something else to come along. And so I think it's hard to claim that there's a monopoly in the industry at the present moment. If you were to go back to the time when Facebook purchased Instagram, you have a little bit of a bigger argument that there was an attempt at monopolization. I see both sides of the argument, as I most of the time do. But I do look at it and I go, okay, is it more important to protect the free market and just hit home about let's make sure we have some level of corporate responsibility, which I think is something that Facebook has lacked for a long time when it comes to their censorship. But really, to protect a free market, we have to have as little government intervention as possible in the free market.
So are you arguing against this antitrust lawsuit?
I think that we have to proceed with caution when it comes to antitrust lawsuits.
And I agree with you. I'm always a little hesitant to give the government more power. And so I'm with you on that. But I do believe, looking at Facebook, they have engaged in behavior that is exactly in line with the monopoly power, with the way that they've, acquired startups, the way that they've essentially just behaved where, like in the example of WhatsApp and Instagram and burying other startups, we really don't have a mainstream alternative with the exception of X. But, moving along, I thought this article was interesting. It's from brain Bluetooth to full RoboCop, where chip implants will be heading soon. And, you look at the book of Revelation, it talks about the future financial system it was alluding to an implant, because it says you will not be able to buy or sell without the mark of the beast in the palm of your forehead and the palm of your hand. And many would suggest that implies, in modern terms, an implant, a chip. And so we're technologically at a point where the 1987 classic film RoboCop is actually a reality. If we remember, it was a robotic body and a full brain computer interface that allowed the cop to access online information such as suspects' faces, using artificial intelligence to help detect threats, and his human memories have been integrated with those from a machine. I mean, in 1987, I was 6 years old. It was like, I remember watching that film at 9 or 10 thinking that was so sci-fi. But when you actually, have you seen RoboCop?
It's been so long.
Yeah, right. It's a long time.
Like, what if that movie came out,
1987.
1989.
Yeah.
It's been a long time.
All the technology in that film is available today. When he looks at a suspect, one would argue that that was artificial intelligence engaging and identifying who that suspect was, and his human memories were merged with machine, like it was also prophesied in the Terminator, which the screenplay happened to come straight out of DARPA.
Reminds me of a Minority Report as well.
Minority Report. All these films, I think, are what you would call predictive programming, essentially priming the general public for what's to come, because suppressed technology is a thing. If they were essentially prophesying artificial intelligence in 1987, one could think maybe in 1987 we already had AI and it was just suppressed technology. Again, this is all just speculation, but I think it's important for the church to be following technological trends, because John wrote in Revelation, there is going to come a time for persecution in the church where your resources will be cut off. See, the culture is not, or I should say that the world is becoming theological. The world and the culture is becoming religious in a fervor that surpasses that of a Southern Baptist service down in the South. I mean, they're preaching transhumanism. They're preaching merging man with technology as a good thing. Be the Tap to Pay, the Apple Pay, the Samsung Pay. These are all precursors and primers for that day when Revelation will come true, where you will not be able to buy or sell unless you have the mark of the beast. Do you think that these technological trends, especially in the financial world, Jason, should be something that the church should be paying attention to?
I think 100%. In terms of what the church's involvement should be, I think that the church needs to look critically at what is coming down the pipeline. I think that the mark of the beast will be probably a little bit more apparent to those that are tuned in. But what we're seeing is that we're seeing this creation or formation of this one world government that's kind of taking place.
Yeah.
And it's taking place in a way that's kind of in front of our eyes, but nobody's looking. And that's going to transition and transform and happen at the same time, where we start to see this kind of one world religion pop up. So I think really the mark of the beast is going to be a symptom of what we're seeing taking place on the global stage. And so I don't necessarily think that we need to look for what is the mark of the beast going to be today, or what is it going to be. I think we need to be looking at the symptoms, or not the symptoms, but the causes and what's going on globally. Now, when we look at what's going on globally, I don't think that this is a situation where we look at it and go like, we need to stop it from happening, because ultimately at the end of the day, we can't stop it from happening.
That's right.
It's been prophesied for thousands of years that this is how this is going to take place, from John, like in Revelations. And so it's going to take place whether or not we like it. And we can sit here and we can argue theology all day long about how this is going to take place and what the mark of the beast might be. But we are seeing play out this idea of globalism. And what we've seen, and here's the important thing to note, is we now look at other cultures and the way that they do things, and we go, well, that's not right. That's not okay that that's what they do in that culture.
Sharia
And
law.
so now we have people that have nothing to do with these native tribes in New Zealand or in some of these countries in Africa, and now we're trying to change the way that they raise their children. They want nothing to do with you. They've been doing this for centuries all by themselves, but we have this globalism idea that, that culture needs to change. But then we also have on the flip side, when it comes to the sinful stuff, that we look at other cultures and we go, well, that culture finds it okay, so we need to find it okay here. And so what we're doing is essentially throughout this process of globalism in America, where we're looking at what's happening in other countries, we're saying, okay, let's make the wrong things that they're doing that we want in America, we're going to say that those are right because they're doing them. But the things that we don't think that they're doing right, they need to change because that's not how we see it as appropriate in America. It's a very interesting dynamic of what's going on.
Yeah, I think that this whole idea of globalism that Jason brought up is absolutely should be front and center for the church, because this is the direction that Revelation prophesied we would go in terms of the global financial system, in terms of one world religion, one world government. And it's going to be in this future that the church is going to be the most persecuted, and it's going to be also, I think, the greatest harvest and the greatest revival the globe will ever see, because that's going to be the true separation between the wheat and the chaff, the sheep and the goats. But moving along, AP News is reporting suspect arrested in arson fire that forced Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro and his family to flee the residence. Apparently, a bold man scaled an iron security fence in the middle of the night, eluded police, and broke into the governor's mansion over there in Pennsylvania, forcing his family to flee. He came forward giving a typical political speech. "I will remain unbowed," the Democrat governor said, and the police have arrested the suspect. Reason I think this is interesting is, 15 or 20 years ago, this would have been ground-shattering news. This would have been almost a 9/11 event in a much sleepier news cycle of yesteryear. But today it just kind of seems like, yawn, just another news story, just a governor getting firebombed at his house.
During his Passover celebration.
Yeah, that's important to mention. That's actually a very important thing to mention.
That's the most important part.
Yeah, sorry I missed that part.
The entire.
It happened on Saturday on
Israel.
Passover, gentlemen. Yes.
Yes.
That's why I'm not a journalist.
And he's a practicing Jew.
Yes, he is a practicing Jew.
And so when we look at what's taking place in the Middle East, it's so hard to look at it and go, okay, number one, we believe in religious protections in this country.
Absolutely.
We believe that if you want to celebrate your religion and the celebrations that go along with your religion, that is protected. It's protected in this country. You have the freedom of religion. You have the freedom to assemble. You have the freedom of speech. And so no matter what, those rights need to be protected above all. And so when it comes to trying to shut down some of the rhetoric that's coming from the pro-Palestine group, that's wrong. It's wrong. We should not remove their First Amendment rights. When it comes to trying to tear down or destroy property or destroy the lives of practicing Jews in this country, that is not acceptable free speech.
And this is when I have the problem with religious protections and creating laws that protect special classes of people, is that you don't need that. It only further divides and further complicates, and I think is a threat to liberty when we create special protections for special classes of people. Last time I checked, Jason, I'm being facetious and sarcastic, is that firebombing people's houses is already an illegal act. So like if I go and I set my neighbor's house on fire, like we don't need to find out if that guy, my neighbor's a Catholic or a Jew or a Muslim. Like the fact that I set his house on fire is already the problem to begin with and should be the end of the problem. But you bring up an interesting point, that the fact that he's a practicing Jew, Governor Shapiro of Pennsylvania, and we are obviously in a time where the Jewish question has become a bigger question. And there's a part of me that, wants to be conspiratorial Catherine and say maybe, just maybe, this is a psyop to drive sympathy for, the victimhood narrative. Here we go again. Another prominent Jew, or just a Jew in general, is being attacked by the evil, quote-unquote, anti-Semites. Again, that's just conspiratorial Catherine talking. Or it could be a legitimate case of a guy who genuinely hates Jews, and Jews are genuinely being targeted in this country because we have a problem in this country where people dislike Jews for their faith. Or it's just, deep state shenanigans to accomplish some political goal.
I mean, listen, we have a mayor in Colorado Springs who faked his own hate crime before the election. And if you think back, right, after the shooting at Club Q here in Colorado Springs, which was performed by a transgendered individual, on a gay nightclub, they took to the streets and decided to deface the property of Focus on the Family, which is a Christian nonprofit here in Colorado Springs. Completely destroyed their sign out front, did tons of property damage, graffiti everywhere, and yet they would not call it a hate crime because they were attacking Christians. Now, if they were attacking Jews, it would be a hate crime. If they were attacking, whatever, the Muslims, it would be a hate crime, but it's Christians, so it's no longer a hate crime in this country. The idea that hate crimes even exist, to a certain degree, when you throw in hate crime as a special additive when you're going to prosecute individuals for crimes, you're really putting an argument that First Amendment rights truly do not exist in this country.
Crypto Daybook, a bizarre $5.4 billion loss has left investors devastated. I want to get one of these crypto bros on the show, maybe a Christian one, because I think the church, or maybe it's just me, Aaron Lujan's ignorant on cryptocurrencies, and I'm part of the church. So if there's any like Christian crypto bros that are like super informed on this topic, let us know. But $5.4 billion loss in one day seems like a pretty big drop in the market for cryptocurrencies. I'm really curious to pick your brain, Jason. What do you think the loss is about, and why should the church be thinking about cryptocurrency?
So, number one, I don't think 5.4 billion crypto loss in one day is anything to be ultra concerned about. We've seen these drastic drops and jumps in the crypto market.
You're right.
Really, there's this investor confidence situation where people are looking at cryptocurrency, and if you followed cryptocurrency for a long time, there's this original debate that cryptocurrency is the hedge for inflation, and that cryptocurrency is the hedge in a time of recession. And so what we're seeing is that when the stock market starts to plummet, which it has, we've seen a decrease in the stock market over the last couple weeks, the owners or the people that own cryptocurrency, what is going on is they're going like, okay, some of them are going to sell off because they're concerned that cryptocurrency is following the stock market, which it did in certain situations in the past, but it also rebounded a little bit faster, and in some cases it rebounded slower. And so I think what we're seeing is this kind of like dip where we have investors that are looking at cryptocurrency and going like, okay, what is it going to do? What are we going to see?
There was a 90s dance song called When You Dip, I Dip, We Dip. Do you remember that song?
No.
Okay. He's a lot younger than me. Totally unrelated. But yeah, the crypto market ebbs and flows. You're right. It's pretty crazy. But in Scripture, it talks about honest weights and measures. And God is big on fairness in the financial markets, is my interpretation of that. Because God is a God that, is a God of order. And so there's this mandate that if we're to have any sort of monetary exchange, the measures and the weights need to be fair, need to be honest. And I think that there needs to be transparency is what Scripture is speaking to. And so one thing that I think the church should be warm about when it comes to cryptocurrency is the fact that this blockchain technology is centered around this spirit and this principle of transparency. I would be really curious to see if there even exists, Jason, a faith-based cryptocurrency. Like, do we even have one?
I have no clue.
Yeah, that would be really cool. I don't know. I think that's a cool idea. But in the light of,
but see, all currency is derived from the perceived value of the currency.
Right.
Right. We're no longer trading chickens for goats. We're no longer trading eggs for meat. We're no longer trading whatever we produce as part of the economy, the local economy, for some other goods and services that are produced by the local economy. We no longer have a barter system like existed for much of the civilized world. So we are seeing that there is a change in the way that we perceive something. At the end of the day, you look at it and you go like cryptocurrency, why does it have value? Well, if you ask a crypto person, they're like, because it's scarce, has scarcity, and scarcity implies value. Okay, but really at the end of the day, it's a ton of numbers that make up what is a coin on this cryptocurrency server. And they're mined, and yes, there's a limited amount, but you look at the US dollar and you go, okay, what makes this dollar bill valuable? Well, because there's a perceived value that a dollar is worth a dollar. And at some point, when you can no longer live up to the expectation of what that dollar supposedly represents or what this cryptocurrency supposedly represents, you're going to have a problem. And so really, I would love to see the church return to more of a system of barter where we're ignoring what the government is trying to put their hands in.
Well, Jason, there's this idea of stablecoin, and that's essentially cryptocurrencies that are tied to something solid like gold. It's tethered to ammunition, for example, or food. So would you be okay with a Christian stablecoin, say that was backed by ammunition, for example, or corn?
Sure, until you realize that ammunition is not where the value is. I think that sometimes we look at what is going on in the world and we think we understand what we need. But I think that when you're talking about what's about to take place, I think that the war is going to be much different than we are thinking.
What war are you referring to?
I'm talking to the next global war. I'm talking to the end times.
Oh, yeah.
I think that there's an element to where the digital world is probably more at risk than your physical body. But the problem is that everything is tied electronically now. If you think about it, you no longer have paper medical records. You no longer have really a paper holding of what is currency. And so if you were to completely eliminate everything electronically from this country, you're left with absolutely nothing but the clothes on your back, what's inside your house, and what you have that you physically possess.
Yeah.
Because your bank account, it's like the scared, if you remember back to 2000, when people were removing large sums of cash from their bank accounts because they didn't know whether or not the computer systems could handle the rollover from
I remember that.
1999 to 2000, and the change in the millennium. That same fear is probably the fear that we need to have today when it comes to what the next attack on U.S. soil is going to be. It's probably not going to be physical. And so we're going to have to return to some sort of barter system. So the question becomes, what real skills do you have in life? And if your current skills are, I'm really good at manipulating AI, that's not a very useful skill when everything that's electronic ceases to exist.
I bought 5.5 acres in the mountains. I want to learn how to raise goats. I want to grow beans. I want to raise chickens. I have no idea where to even begin. I'm a middle class suburb kid. Kind of grew up in the Southern California era of Nerf guns and Cartoon Network. So I'm not saying this to be joking. I'm saying this because I really sense, Jason, that what you're touching on is that our generation of young men, although I would probably consider myself maybe middle-aged man, is going to be the first generation to have to swing the pendulum back to the physical world. We're going to have to teach our sons how to chop firewood and operate machinery and tractors and how to work with our hands in the age where the young boys are completely glued to tablets and Minecraft. I feel like the mousetrap has been set, the cheese is primed, and the globalists are just ready to bring down the hammer because we are sheep primed for the slaughter. We have, I mean, literally, I see, white liberal women freak out when their Starbucks order is not properly made. Like, what in the world is going to happen when we're without power, or Iran decides to take out the fragile power grid, and we don't have diesel trucks delivering gasoline and basic supplies to your neighborhood grocery store? We are literally going to eat ourselves alive. I mean, we're in trouble, guys. And I say that with a smile, kind of like the Joker, like, ha ha ha, ha. We're in trouble, guys. Like, this is serious stuff.
100%. Well, thank you for joining us on Daily Insurgency. Join us tomorrow, same time, 3 o'clock, for more news and more conversation.
Peace.
See you then.